There you go, guys.
Bell Bean don't talk like this.
We're live, so. Oh my! Up next, the supernatural realm with our guest Thomas Fusco. Right after this.
Sometimes you got to get along down the road. We got a long, long way to go. Scared to live, scared to die. We ain't perfect, but we try. Get along while we can. Always give love the upper hand. Paint a wall, learn to dance. Call your mom, buy a book, drink a beer, sing a song, make a friend. Can't we all get along?
And welcome back to the Supernatural Realm on this Tuesday, July 3rd, 2018. Well, our special guest is filling in this evening. It's Thomas P. Fusco. Chip, why don't you give the bio of Thomas, or maybe Thomas can tell us about himself, which I think everybody probably knows who Thomas is by now. But you know.
Yeah, definitely a friend to the show, friend to this show, friend to my show, friend to this network. It's an exciting day. We're celebrating our independence by giving you the independence of wisdom going into this great Independence Day. Thomas Fusco has probably the most important book of this generation for anybody that embraces science, religion, physics, and wants answers to the paranormal and the supernormal, because it's all in this book, Behind the Cosmic Veil, by our friend Thomas Fusco here. A new vision of reality, merging science, the spiritual, and the supernatural. Probably the best book you can read that encompasses all these subjects, and we're excited to have him back.
Yes, we are. Very excited to have him back. If you don't assume the fetal position by the end of reading his book, you never will. So.
Well, I've got this chair that puts me right into it, so I'm good.
And you got to make sure you take the red pill, too, before you read the book.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh, what, this heat? Yeah, you bet.
Oh, man, this heat's been brutal. Oh my goodness, we were out there this morning, driving around in the construction and the heat. Man, I was glad to be home after like 1 o'clock this afternoon. But yeah.
Well, I've been home all day, because my wife gets hot very easily. I mean, temperature-wise, of course. With the air conditioning here is like on, so I got a sweater going on. I step out the door and it's instant syrup,
I think it's actually hotter than here than it is in Florida right now. Thomas?
Yeah, we can go to Florida to cool off, right, Tom?
Oh, yeah. I'm back, baby.
He's back. Woohoo! Yeah, and we had some Kenny Chesney leading into the show for Timmy.
Yep.
And I got my Texas 10-step going on while you're putting it. Yeah, I know it. I do.
I figured with all the BS and politics, I figured it'd be a good song to play because we all need to just get along. I mean.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Can't we all just get along?
See, Rodney King probably with the best quote of the decade there, and it comes from a guy who is getting beat up because he was on PCP, and still the best quote of the decade, at least according to me.
Yeah.
Why can't we all just get along?
Yeah.
I mean, who well said it,
Exactly.
We hear that and we think of Rodney King.
Thomas, how's the weather in Florida been these last few days?
Well, it's pretty normal for Florida right here, right now. Essentially, what I try to tell people is that once you get into about mid-May, you're in summer.
Right.
And, yeah, and it's funny, and it varies a week or one way or the other sometimes, but it's like somebody throws a switch.
Mm-hmm.
And, the weather gets into the low 90s during the day and low 70s at night. Under normal conditions, it will storm at least once every day.
Wow.
Which is necessary because if it doesn't, the place just dries up.
Yeah.
It's pretty much kind of thing. Through to maybe about mid-October, all you'd have to do is photocopy 1 week's worth of weather, and then just post it. Just post it on your news feed or whatever.
It's cut and paste weather.
Yeah, and you will be over 90% correct over those 5 months period.
Right. Yeah, I always wanted to be a weatherman down there. I mean, that's got to be the easiest job in the world. See, I mean, even up here, they can. That's a job where they can be wrong every day, and they'll still get a lot of money for it. It's like a dream job of mine. But in Florida, it's almost like you said, cut and paste, and the rain kind of comes down like flipping a switch on and off.
Oh, yeah.
It showers like a faucet, and everything floods up, and it's all in the course of 3 minutes, and then it stops. And within 10 minutes, the sun has dried everything back up.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. And the amount of rain we get. I mean, the whole state is pretty much this giant sponge. It's a beach, and it sits on top of all this limestone, these limestone formations. And you could get, literally, you could get an inch of rain in a very short period of time and go out 10 minutes later and not find a puddle.
Not find one. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, if that happened where my wife come from in central Illinois, they'd be calling out the National Guard.
Hey, have you seen it snow down there?
I have heard rumors that one time, some years ago, it snowed for a short period of time.
I was there. It was
down here in Central Florida.
77. Yeah, well, no, I was in Miami at the time. We had a 6-lane highway, US 1, and it was barren.
Oh yeah, thank
snow
goodness.
landed. It didn't. It hit the ground and it was gone, but it was coming down, and the roads were closed. I mean, every store was closed. It was like a nuclear attack. Burger King shut down. I mean, I've never. Who shuts down Burger King ever?
Oh yeah, man. In the
like
best
that.
of times, these boys are down here. These boys and girls drive in a fog, man. It's Florida. They they say that Jersey drivers and New York drivers are bad because they drive so fast and, they ignore the traffic signs and all that.
Yep.
These people think they're driving somewhere else.
All right.
I mean, they're on the road and, they're driving and they think they're watching Leave It to Beaver or something. It's, oh man, it's crazy.
It does that have effect, but most of the people on the roads are either in their 20s or their hundreds.
Something
you got
like
the worst
that.
of both.
So it's pretty rough, and so there are very few cars when you see on the road. They're mostly trucks, and most of them have, or at least in my area, a lot of them have Confederate flags on some portion of the truck.
Oh yeah.
So it's like that, but. Yeah, I mean, if it snowed down here, they shut the whole thing down. Otherwise, you would have a disaster.
Yeah, probably. How you doing there, Timmy?
Pretty good. Yeah, we've been having some bad weather here, man. Flooding the last couple of
Really?
days. Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, they
We
called the
haven't had
county.
rain once, and
They
we're about 4 hours from you.
Yeah, they had to call the county dive team out, Team 300, to rescue
Wow.
people in the streets and stuff. It was bad.
Wow.
Wow.
What were they doing?
I don't know, they just flooded and water didn't recede fast enough because of all the rain we had yesterday. So yeah.
Is that where you are, or just in the area? Or?
It's in the area. We flooded a couple months ago here in Butler, but they had some flooding in a couple of towns over from us. So yeah, it was bad.
Wow. Yeah, we haven't had a drop here, and everybody around us is getting all this rain and heavy rain and thunderstorms and all this, and nothing here. Nothing. That's our area, though. That's what happens in our area.
Where are you, Chip?
I'm in Albany, the state capital of the Empire State.
Oh yes, okay.
Yeah.
Well, don't you guys all pay the same preacher up there?
Pretty much, yeah. No, I mean, it's a thing where very little happens here because all the politics are here, And if any of these politicians get in trouble, it sets a standard for everybody else to not get in trouble. So that's all we do here is not get in trouble, which means nothing happens here.
And I don't know if I could survive up there politically, man.
Well, that's why I get thrills in things like super geometry,
Yeah, exactly.
I have never heard that particular description of the North and any.
Well, I mean, most of the state is got. I mean, you got New York City downstate, and all the counties that surround it, and the Jersey area, where everything goes at light speed, And you come here and it kind of slows down, and you go a little north and further west, to Rochester or Buffalo, and they're much nicer there. The further west you go, the nicer the people get. In New York City, you walk down the street and you give somebody eye contact, and they look the other way. Because you are supposed to look the other way. You're supposed to look like you're not from there, or people will come up and try to sell you a watch or something.
You had a watch, you'd know it'd be nighttime.
Yeah.
No time.
Yeah, you have to find a real polite way to say no.
I lived and worked on the island for a while.
Did you?
Yeah, I worked over in Valley Stream.
Oh.
And I lived and worked. Where was it? Goshen. I lived for a while in Goshen, New York.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's up on 17.
Yeah, it is on 17.
And
Yeah.
I worked in Monroe.
Wow.
Yeah.
No
For
kidding.
a little while. That was
See,
one
and those are,
of my adventures.
yeah, it goes from kind of a noisiest area to a quietish area. So you had the best of both worlds, I have to go to Buffalo just to have friends. I mean, that's what it's like. Yeah. Because, well, no, when you're in Albany, you walk down the street, you say hi to somebody, you get the head nod,
Oh yeah.
Or maybe they'll say, hey, if it's a real good day, and you go out west to like the Finger Lakes or Rochester, Buffalo, and you walk down the street and people stop you. Oh, you're not from here, are you? Because everybody knows everybody. Where are you from? And they actually care, when you give them the answer. They respond, they listen, it's a unique thing.
Well, I think, I mean, looking at it kind of seriously and having lived in, a few different places up in that area, in that kind of tri-state area where you got metropolitan New York and eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey, People who have never lived there don't really understand the pace of life that's there, the insane rat race that it is.
Yeah.
And I never knew myself. I went on vacations, a week at a time, and come back and say, well, gee, I think I'm refreshed. No.
No, you're exhausted because you had to go 18 miles an hour. I'd like to think that's where Einstein came up with the speed of light, just being in that city and seeing the different pace. And then like going to someplace like Vermont where the speed is like nil. Yeah. I mean, it's like the whole state's on Valium,
Yeah, there's something very different going on up in New England. I don't know whether I'd want to comment on that or not.
I kind of like it, It's a bit Norman Rockwell-esque,
Yes, on the surface it is.
Yeah, and a very interesting paranormal activity in New England, where I think that model of supergeometry would kind of have even a different kind of shine to it, and I think it makes sense to a lot of people. I talked to a couple of people from New England about the book, who have read your book, Behind the Cosmic Veil, for those just joining us, or with Thomas Fusco. And they seem more scientific. They seem more scientifically inclined. They understand the physics. They understand what molecules are cooperating with each other in the air,
How posh.
And they get it. They get it. So, New England, I think, would be a good spot for people that haven't read the book yet to really embrace the book. It's very intelligent but quiet,
Yeah.
Thanks for the plug, guys.
Well, it's worth it. I mean, this is a knock your socks off book, and it's one of a kind, and it should be read.
It should be read by everybody, and not just people, in the paranormal or science or whatever. It should be written by all humanity,
Yeah, it really should. I mean, if you embrace science, you should read this book. If you embrace religion, you should read this book. If you embrace physics, you should read this book. If you embrace paranormal or supernatural or psychic ability, you should read this book. And, if you don't embrace any of those things, you should still read this book.
Yeah, because it explains humanity in a very scientific, biblical way. There's no other book like it. So.
Right. I mean, we like to think, and Timmy, you and I have talked about this. We always like to think that the answers that we seek are somewhere in between the worlds of science and religion. Mm-hmm. We've thought that for a long time, but Tom here has taken that and ran with it in a way that is even ahead of time for theoretical physicists. I mean, it's amazing. And the best thing about it is he makes it so you can understand everything. He walks you through some very complicated processes and allows you to understand them so you feel like you belong, Mm-hmm. And you're looking above the fields of science, above the fields of religion, above the fields of quantum physics, above the fields of the paranormal, supernatural, and psychic worlds, and you feel like you belong there, and you come away feeling smart as anything. Mm-hmm. It's like an experience,
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, you and I on that other network.
Mm-hmm. Other network.
That one.
I can't remember who it is.
I don't know either. It kind of fell by the wayside, hasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's that place that is where that has all the Z's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the people sleeping Z's radio.
That's good. I thought it was at first, but anyway, Tim, you and I, gosh, we've talked so many hours and covered so many different parts of this, and there just doesn't seem to be an end to it.
Mm-hmm.
That if you pick anything out that's kind of unusual that happens in reality. Supergeometric theory seems to touch on it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Everything,
yeah.
So it's like, when I go on a radio show, I don't have to prepare to come on. There's no way to even scratch the surface in 2 hours.
No, there really isn't.
And even the hosts, you guys, you don't have to prepare much.
That's what I was going to say. We don't have to prepare either. Just
a normal question into supernatural or whatever, and it just starts rolling.
Flows, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I spoke at those couple symposiums, and there were a lot of people there that really thought I kind of stole the show. But all these people are standing up on the podium and going, "Oh yes, well," and pointing at their PowerPoint presentation with all the pictures of different stuff, and they're reading their notes and everything. And I just, I was outside having a cigarette. They said, "Hey, Tom, you're on." So I get up there and I just start talking, man, and it's just. Is an hour up yet? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, see you later, guys.
Did you even need the PowerPoint for the talk?
No, I don't. I deplore PowerPoint presentations.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. No offense to
so
PowerPoint,
boring.
we're just not PowerPoint people,
it's got its place, yeah.
They're so boring and predictable. It ain't funny,
Yeah, Tim, it's like a freaking boardroom or something. It's like, give me a break. And the one place I spoke really was interesting because the way it was set up, the stage was only like 1 or 2 steps above where the audience was sitting. It wasn't like the audience is down there and you're up there,
Yeah.
You were right there. So it's like, this is stupid. I just got off and started walking around and talking to people in the audience, man. It's like, I was down there with them. It's like, come on, these are the stars. Not these idiots that get on the stage. The heroes to all these conventions are the people that attend it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, because I know I wouldn't pay that kind of money to come see me.
No.
I would.
So these guys, but anyway, you can pretty much start talking about it anywhere, any kind of, what was I going to talk about? Because I know, Chip, I was just on your show.
Yes, you were. A week ago. Yeah, a week ago. And wow, and yeah. We were just, the show's coming to an end, and we were just getting started on the real meat.
It's crazy. I mean, Tim, you and I have been there 100 times, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just never know. You just never know what direction the show's going to go. It just.
Hey, we could just talk about whether it'd still be super geometrical.
Yeah, it just runs itself pretty much,
Yeah. Well, now after that kind of an introduction, I better earn my keep here.
Just think, Thomas, you might actually sell a book on our network.
It can happen, yeah.
It could, yeah.
Not on that other one. Not on that other Z's one.
Well, Z is like 0, isn't it? Oh, it's terrible. And, it's like, don't ever let that guy on that network anymore. We're not going to let him on. I've been banned from a couple of networks, that's for sure.
Wow. Well, the thing is, like you were saying about talking at the symposium, the people in the seats there embrace it. And so all the other experts that are speaking there get defensive. And that's just the way it is. We've seen it in the paranormal community does that too. We've always called for paranormal unity,
Yeah.
But unity, like everybody wears the same brand underwear.
Can't we all just get along? Yeah.
Yeah. But I have to defer to Thomas when I think that now, because in this theory of supergeometry, everything really starts from conflict. And builds on the way down. So.
Well, yeah, and that's an interesting point because, sometimes we're lulled into thinking when we look at something locally. Like if we were just going to consider our own local system, let's say with the Earth and the Moon. just those two bodies right there. We have a tendency to think that things are balanced, or if we're pouring our morning orange juice and it stops at the level that we stopped, and it just kind of sits on the table and is nice and still and stable, that we have some sort of balance. But the reality is that the physical universe exists in a state of what I call controlled imbalance. So there's always forces working against each other, and the result, or the resultant, if we want to call it that way, of those conflicts is what we witness and experience in physical reality. There's always one influence pushing against the other.
Right.
And so what we have is more of a controlled imbalance. And, if you start looking at it that way, you begin to see, a little bit deeper beneath the surface, or above the surface, so to speak.
So in other words, we have to have controlled imbalance for there to be some sort of balance?
Well, the balance is controlled imbalance.
Oh, okay.
That's what draws the illusion of balance. It's like a demilitarized zone. That's where the balance is. And of course, according to my work, this is a result of what I call primary imbalance.
Okay.
We can kind of get into the religious aspect of it a little bit, only because most people are familiar with the concepts of good and evil.
Right.
Life and death, God and Satan, the devil, those kinds of things. But all of those are what I would call humanistic. Or personified. In other words, these are influences, for lack of a better word, that, because we can't really call them forces, because scientifically speaking, they're not forces. We can talk about, in terms of an influence, that at least gives us some intellectual leeway in our terminology.
So, Thomas, the controlled imbalance is being allowed to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, but when you say allowed to happen, that implies a conscious intent.
Right.
And so we find that there's evidence in our universe for a conscious intent.
Right.
On a grand scale as well. But and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But the point is that if you remove the humanistic, the personification aspect of these opposing influences, you see something that's going on a grand scale. You see this primary conflict, this controlled imbalance, so to speak, and what we see unfold as physical reality is a result of the interaction between those things. Now, that in my work in supergeometric theory, we draw a model of reality that is all that there is, reality that is larger than just the physical universe.
Right.
That there's a super physical or super geometric overlay on top of the standard universal geometric structure. And I call that the patriverse, from the Latin pater, meaning father.
Father. Yeah.
I could say it's the mother of all reality and call it a matriverse, but trying to follow tradition a little bit here. And of course the patriverse and the universe combine together to form the omniverse. Somebody already pirated that from me last year or something in a book.
Interesting.
Yeah, they didn't. They put their own twist on it. Yeah, so its own. It's so difficult to break out of materialism. Not really not realizing that the omniverse, by its very nature, breaks out of, materialism.
Right.
But, if we take a look at this, and let's relate it spiritually with talking about God, for example. And I know there's a lot of religions out there. You guys that know me know I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of look at the Judeo-Christian scriptures as a foundation, or at least a reference point to operate from. So here we have this supreme creator, this supreme being. And if we're going to follow the description in the scriptures of the nature of this supreme being, first of all, he's eternal.
Mm-hmm.
There's no beginning and no end with him. So everything there is a constant now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There is no dimension. There is no distinguishing between then and when, or between here and there. He is also all-knowing.
Mm-hmm.
He is also unchanging. That's emphasized in several places in the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
That he's basically a pure being, a pure substance. That he never changes. He's always the same, and that he's been that way always.
Omnipresent.
Yeah, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, eternal. Best paraphrased in the biblical term, I am.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much all you need to say. It's all embodied in that. And, there are other religions that take a look at their supreme deity very similarly.
Yep.
That have similar characteristics. Others don't, but, everybody's going to relate with what I'm talking about. They get it. All right, this is that God, and this is what, is said about it. Here's the problem. All right, say this God, this creator, decides, or it's in his plan, it's inherent in him, that he is going to make a physical universe. Go create it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this physical universe has dimensions. In order for it to be physical, there has to be differences between here and there.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be differences between then and now.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be in a state of flux and change.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it would not be able to be brought into being in stages and steps. Where we can say this is the beginning, this is the end, this was the past, here comes the future. This is far, this is near. All these things emerging and evolving and materializing and progressing. We have processes that are part of the physical universe. Well, there's a problem here. All of these qualities are diametrically opposed to the supreme God. None of the qualities of the physical that he intends to create have anything in common with his own nature. And this is part of what we were talking about the other week, Chip, about the Augustinian mysteries.
Right.
The mysteries that were proposed by St. Augustine, that the Catholic Church embraces as these things that are never going to be able to be understood by human beings. They're unsolvable mysteries, at least to the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, what you have here is a situation where there would be no way that this kind of a being, this supreme God, could create such a realm inside of himself. It wouldn't be able to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, it would be like, I don't know, it'd be hard to describe. It'd be like taking a lump of clay and throwing it on a table and expecting it to take a shape without anything molding it.
Right.
It can't exist. And the Bible says so much that in certain places. For example, one of the things that it says is that flesh and blood cannot ever obtain the kingdom of God. It can't enter into it, nor does corruption have any part inside of incorruption. It's completely incompatible. Mm-hmm. In another place, it basically expresses the idea that in the presence of God, everything that's the physical would just kind of vaporize. Mm. So, all right, where then does God create this thing mm-hmm. that he wants to call a universe, or we call a universe? So he had to create it outside of himself. It couldn't be created inside of him. St. Paul makes a mention of this too. He says, while we are in these bodies, while we're in this tent, he calls it, because he was a tent maker. He looked at it that way. Mm-hmm. We are exiled from God. So God had to create the physical universe outside of himself. And therefore we have a separate realm. But we have another problem. We have dimensions in the physical universe. I mentioned it before. We have differences between here and there and then and now. That's my expression of spatial and temporal dimensions. Mm-hmm. They're expressions of differences between here and there and then and now. You know me, I take the lowest common denominator, man.
You do.
Yeah, I try to say it as simple, stupid as it can. Anything less than that, and you got the brain of an earthworm,
Tom, was that painful when you wrote the book to put everything as simple as possible so, the average person can understand it? Was that painful?
Oh, yeah, Tim, it took years, man.
Mm-hmm.
It took years to write something and say, this won't work. Throw it away. Write something else, this won't work. Throw it away.
Yeah,
and then I come up to something that says, well, this looks reasonably, that it'll convey what I, intend to convey, because, if you're going to convey an idea, it's your responsibility to convey it in a way that people can understand it.
That had to be painful for you to do that.
Well, it was tedious.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't painful. It was tedious.
Right.
And even then when I finally pulled the trigger, there's a few things there that, over the years and being in so many radio shows and being asked so many questions and being in so many conversations, that a lot of ways have come up that actually are better than what's in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
So that if I had to write it again today, I would write it a little bit differently than what I did.
Wow.
But yeah, anyway, so, we have this opposing force in nature where there's differences, there's processes, things form and then they decay, they break down.
Mm-hmm.
In order to have dimensions, you have to have differences. That's that real simple, stupid, lowest common denominator way of looking at it, which I like to look at things that way if I can.
All right.
So where do you get the differences? If you're God, how do you create differences?
Creating a duality? Something that...
Yeah. I mean, in our, in the Judaic writings, when the term Satan is used, the underlying meaning is adversary.
Right.
So here we are where we have something where it looks like the greater positive absolute, which is what, and I try to break these down in scientifically meaningful terms in some way. I want to get away from the traditional philosophical, metaphysical, religious terminology because the people who are metaphysical, philosophical, religious, spiritual in their thinking understand the more scientific way to describe these things.
Right.
But the scientifically trained person can't get into the other stuff. So when you get into that, those meaningful kind of definitions that are kind of dry and a little bit, more precise and less religious or spiritual, we can have common ground in those conversations.
Right.
Using those kinds of terminologies. So anyway, this greater force, or what I call, the positive absolute, Charles Fort called it the same thing, needed to generate or create a negative absolute, which was the exact opposite. Now, where the two collide, and I'm describing basically the what I call the theosphere, which is basically the omniverse is contained within the theosphere. This is larger, pictures of reality, bigger and bigger pictures, rather than copping out and saying, well, we just need to create an alternative universe, a parallel universe, which all that does is kicks the can down the road, because where the hell did that come from?
Right.
And if it's parallel, then it'll look exactly like ours. And if it's not parallel, it would be unrecognizable by ours.
Right.
Given 13, 14 billion years of different processes based on a completely different set of information and different physical laws.
And expecting the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it couldn't be. It would be, it would be something completely incompatible, incongruous, and unrecognizable by anything in our universe. But the scientists who really know this, they don't like to talk about this on air because it's bad for business. They want the people to think that, in 100 different universes, there's a copy of them, and one's wearing a bolo hat, one's wearing a kilt or a skirt. The other guy's married to this guy, this one's married to her, and they want to think that, in some universe, I must be as rich as Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so people want to believe that. But the reality is that it would be completely unrecognizable. So anyway, my system uses these, higher layers of reality that extend beyond the speed of light. To show how processes occurring in that super geometric realm trickle down and emerge as the physical universe that we're familiar with. So anyway, within these two absolutes, you have what I call a zone of conflict. It's primary conflict. And this is where the pre-dimensional waves are created that will ultimately materialize into physical reality. So it's almost like if you were taking the old Indian way of taking two sticks and rubbing them together, or whatever they did to create fire. You have these two opposing pieces that you're rubbing together. And the more intense the friction is between the two, the hotter they get. They begin to wear down. They begin to change their characteristic nature at that point of contact. Eventually, there's so much friction and so much conflict between the two that it reaches a certain temperature, and then the sticks ignite. Well, according to my model, it works the same way. Is that the conflict between God and Satan, or good and evil, or the positive and negative absolute, however you want to call it, becomes so intense that these pre-dimensional waves begin to densify. They become increasingly more dense until they decelerate to a point where they reach the speed of light from above. As soon as they reach the speed of light, they begin to emerge as physical reality.
Which is slower than the speed of light.
Exactly. It trickles down from the speed of light. So it's like, it's like looking above, standing at above and looking down, taking the perspective of, rather than what science takes, given a rock, derive God. My approach is given God, derive the rock.
Right.
You know, and the two sides, these two approaches, have grown to ignore the other. And say, well, as long as we understand the rock, we don't need to think about God. And the other side says, as long as we understand God, we don't need to think about the rock. Hey, folks, news flash. It's all part of flipping reality. And if you happen to be one of them poor souls that are sitting down minding your own business at the dinner table, and suddenly, you know, your cabinet drawers start flying open, and you know, silverware starts launching all over the place, and the refrigerator starts rocking and rolling, you better think about both. Because the rock certainly isn't doing it. So, you know, and you know me, I kind of say it in an entertaining way, but
Yes, you do.
but this is it. This is how it is put together. Now, when we look at that, we've got a couple of different bridges between various disciplines that form. We've talked a lot about paranormal phenomena.
Right.
We've talked a lot about information in relation to paranormal phenomena, that all these things, not only in normal physical reality, but in paranormal reality, are expressions of materializing information or materialized information. But we all know from many decades of research, you know, as opposed to the paranormalist speculations about, you know, the past event was recorded on the fabric of space-time, which means they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, you know, or it's coming from the sump pump in the basement, you know, or some river next door, something like that. There's no place for that information locally to be stored. So there's an issue where we have to look outside of what the local is.
Right.
When we have in science, in physics, when we have a wave, what's it called? I'm forgetting. Here, let me get another sip of coffee.
or drink a Red Bull.
Okay, yeah, I just had to visit university for a second, but I'm back now.
We're not at the diffluential yet, right?
No, well, we're right in the middle of it. It's just that when you get caught in the middle of the stream, you're not going left or right. You know, it's an eddy. You got to stick a hand out and get a grab of some direction. They're called wave functions. In quantum,
We lose Thomas.
Well, his face is still lit up on the. So yeah, Thomas, we can't hear you, buddy.
Yeah, you fell out of our radio.
hello.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay, there he is. There he is.
All right. See that? I caught the wrong bus.
Oh man.
Or wave function.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you have that wave function that we use mathematically to help determine the probability of a quantum event, these are supposed to be abstracts.
Mm-hmm.
The wave function is not really supposed to exist practically, and yet they're used to actually predict the outcome of physical reality, of physical processes.
Mm-hmm.
So what supergeometry, what my theory indicates, is that wave functions are real.
Mm-hmm.
That mathematics actually describes and works within an aspect of reality. It's just something that isn't physical.
Right.
you know. And now, so that's another branch. I'm just mentioning one of numerous bridges that this idea, that this picture forms. And of course, on the religious side, it's obvious. Oh, this is good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we know that this has something to do with everything coming into being, because this is how the Bible kind of casts it.
Mm-hmm.
That we exist in this realm that stands between these two diametrically opposed forces. You know, in the old days, they thought about, you know, Satan maybe having a domain below and God having his domain above. And then we kind of sit in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's this great cosmic war. Who was it that wrote a very interesting book like that? What's his name? Cosmic Chess Match.
No idea.
Look
it
what's
up.
his name? Yeah, somebody look it up on a computer.
Cosmic Chess Match?
Yeah, it's
Marzulli.
yeah, L.A. Marzulli.
Oh, man, you type fast. Holy crap.
Well, you know, this is important.
I was getting to that.
That's because he took the red pill, Tim.
Oh, I'm
That's
telling
right.
you, man. That isn't that Red Bull, too. Shit.
Yeah, and the Red Bull, too, yeah. So we're really red today.
Oh, man.
L.A. Marzulli, great guy. Love him. He's got little weird ideas. But I'll tell you what, there's a guy that really 100% believes in his work. He is a no BS kind of guy. They had him on Ancient Aliens, and they were doing those little, you know, snippets of interviews, and they took what he was saying, and they kind of took it out of context. And you know how they do it, guys.
Mhm.
You know what they do to make it sound like you're saying something completely different than what you were.
Right.
And LA told them pretty much take your TV show and stick it up where the sun don't shine.
Well, that's why they edited it, because everything's aliens.
Mm.
Yeah, and all the other people are they're drooling out of the corners of their mouth. Oh gosh, I'll be on your show. I'll do anything you want. You
Yeah.
know?
Right.
These intellectual worms, you know. I'll do anything you want me to. You know, so LA got integrity. I don't agree with everything, you know, with some of the foundations of some of the things he reckons, because he accepts certain things as factual that I think are completely unverifiable.
Well, he still earned your respect, though.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. And either one of you, if you guys can get LA on your show, man, try to do it.
All right.
Because your audience will really like what he has to say. He's very Christian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he believes in the thing about the cosmic chess match has to do with the, you know, forces of light and darkness and the watchers and the demons and all these things that are working in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
Well, can I at least ask if he interprets the scriptures like you do? Because in the book, and your book, Behind the Cosmic Veil, cosmicveil.com, you know, you can get a good deal on it if you go there. But when you look at the scriptures, you look at the scriptures in the culture and the language of the time period in which it was written, which I think is very rare and certainly earned my respect. Do you think he would interpret them the same way?
I think he would find that very exciting.
Okay.
I think he would find that very appealing. I can't say whether LA does or does not look at certain things that way in the scriptures. He certainly wants to cast those things within a historical framework,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of people that study the Old Testament want to do that. But to reproduce the ancient mindset is something very different. And it's something that you really have to kind of pull yourself out of. It's almost, guys, like, forget everything you know.
Mm-hmm.
And place yourself back in that time and read it from that perspective. And that's a very hard thing to do, because most people are looking for something.
All right.
They have a preconceived notion. and they will approach that book with the blinkers on. You know what they put on the horses so the horse doesn't see to the left and the right, so he doesn't, have a fit and kill himself if a leaf blows by or. Yeah, let me tell you something. Horses got 3 synapses tenuously connected together.
All right.
And that's pretty much it. That's why they let the hairless apes ride on their backs. And still have a stupid, satiated look on their face.
Hey, Thomas, who was that guy that you mentioned a few weeks back that's making equipment related to your work? Who was his name?
Graham Smith.
Okay.
Graham Smith.
Graham Smith.
Yeah, I can't, on his Facebook account.
Okay.
And everybody wants to give the guy a shout and say, hey, we're into the supernatural too. On his Facebook account, he spells his name S-M-Y.
Okay, yeah. The British, right?
Yes.
Graham and
but
Graham.
I've also seen him spell it normally or American, on this side, with the I.
Hey, I have to ask if L.A. Marzulli knows you or not, because I found him. Does he know you?
He knows me from having been a speaker.
Okay. Well, I'm going to use
along
that.
with me at one of the symposiums. So, yes, he was a fellow speaker. I got a chance to talk to him just a tiny bit. But if I remember correctly, he had come in. They had arranged for him to be one of the early speakers because he had another engagement. And then as soon as he did his presentation, I think he kind of wrapped up the next day and took off.
Wow.
And we didn't see him, because we would have these gatherings, in the bars and in the lounges and all this stuff, and people would be kibitzing and, Nick Redfern and all. He was great. Now, you would never know that Nick Redfern is as famous in certain circles as he is.
Wow.
I mean, you sit down and talk to Nick, he's just a regular guy.
And
he talks to you like a regular guy, and he'll sit and he'll share a beer with you like a regular guy. You would never think he's, in certain, areas, he's a celebrity.
Wow.
He's a personality within the UFO community. So, we would get together and kibitz and talk, and LA just never participated in any of that. He was in and out. So, but I could tell you this, he's a great guy. He's very strong in his beliefs.
Well, we respect that.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, it's this and that, this is what I'm going to talk about, and if you don't like it, afumats. But he's not arrogant or egotistical about it at all. It's just that, hey, 1 and 1 plus 2. You don't like that? Go back to school. It's one of them kind of things. So,
well, I reached out to him. This Graham Smith, is he in the UK?
Yeah, he's in the UK.
There's 18,000. Do you think he might have been a foreman at the Mayo Civil Engineering Limited?
Oh, I give up.
All right. I think I'm already connected to him. So.
But he used to do a show with a fella named Ashley Knibb, K-N-I-B-B.
K-N-I-B-B. And
those two guys did paranormal investigations together, and they had a radio show or a podcast. And when they had me as a guest, they were introduced to my work, and they were very, very influenced by it. Ashley is pursuing his own particular read on some of the paranormal. So he was kind of committed in his thinking in a certain way. Graham was wide open. And so he took the book, he read it, thought about what I had to say, and came to a realization that, hey, because his is a search for the scientific reality behind the paranormal as well.
Right.
And he said, this guy's got a handle on something that has never been wrapped up before. It's never been grasped before.
A lot of people say that about your work.
Yeah, really. You know, I just I wish they would read that part that says "send your dollar to." No, I'm silly. I'm being stupid. But anyway, yeah. So Graham actually underwent to build test equipment for paranormal investigations
Wow.
that will actually test some of the predictions made by my theory.
Wow.
And this is the only guy that's ever done it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last time I was able to talk to him, that we had a conversation, he was in the process of trying to find a how would you call it, a regularly paranormal active site.
Wow.
That regularly and consistently displays activity. Because this kind of equipment, folks, you can't wear it portably and run around a house.
Right.
You know, I was like, oh, I see the EVP thing moving, you know. And
Thomas, what was that place David went to? What was the name of that?
Oh, the hotel?
Yeah, what was the name of that hotel? I can't remember.
Oh, it's up in New York somewhere.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be a perfect place for Graham to go to.
Yeah, except that he's quite a few thousand miles away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Shanley Hotel.
Oh, the Shanley. Yeah, I used to go there all the time. I loved the Shanley Hotel.
That was
an
where
awesome place.
David had tested his prediction that what may be causing the uncommon, the anomalous ionization of the local atmosphere that he had been testing for and measuring for some time at the onset and during the duration of a paranormal event. He ultimately came to the conclusion that the only thing that could be doing this is exotic matter.
Right.
Wow, really?
And that because this is, his theory, which is what he calls a wormhole theory, is very similar to mine in the way that it expresses itself physically.
Right.
What's behind it in his is very different than what's in mine. But we both came to the conclusion, him studying the rock, me starting from the theoretical pencil-pushing God perspective, actually met in the middle.
Right.
Independently of one another.
Right.
So he based his research on, his theories on his experiments.
His actually,
and me, I just sat on my butt pushing a pencil.
His actually works. His theory actually works opposite of yours, but you come to the same conclusion.
Yeah, the source is very different.
Right.
His depends on a different universe.
Right.
His depends on a universe that is somehow connected to ours.
Right.
But his test equipment can only measure up to the surface of physical reality.
Right.
It can't look beyond it. And so him being classically trained in the sciences, he tends to pull upon the materialistic paradigm that is a part of the environment in which he was trained.
Right.
So this is where these, like I said earlier, this is where these alternative universes come from, the idea that everything that we observe must have a physical explanation. And nothing exists outside the physical. So if it's not contained within your own physical universe, find another physical universe that you can borrow the cause from. So that everything stays nice and material for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I shouldn't say it like that. I love David and his work. But to get to what I was explaining, he was the one who decided to test for gamma radiation.
There we go.
Because gamma radiation would be the natural consequence of emerging exotic matter colliding with normal matter just as it did in the early universe. And also that there would be no possible way that any scientific or skeptic could say that a hotel room was somehow generating gamma radiation.
It was so dangerous they had to get. It was so dangerous they had to get out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, man. You know, we're talking in the hearts of nuclear reactors, and in high altitude lightning strikes and freaking supernovas and that kind of thing, man. At least in natural occurrences, there's a lot of man-made gamma radiation, but and this is what he found. In fact, the levels got so high at one point at the Shanley that he had to get his investigative team out of the area.
Yeah.
You got to be really?
It was dangerous. Yeah.
And I've been there so many times. I wish I had checked for gamma radiation.
This was in the basement. He was getting readings.
And I can't tell you how many interviews that he and I have both been on, where we were actually talking to paranormal investigators who could actually go out in the field and test for these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and it's the same thing. Oh, that's amazing, that's great at the end of the show. And then next week we're going to have Joe and Sally come in with their latest EVPs that they recorded from Upper Timbit, Siberia.
Hey man, I've done that.
Well, we all do, and it's part of your job. But you have to understand, from my point of view.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you can take the field to a new level.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask a double question quickly because we're close to this point. Would it be jumping too far ahead to ask you about the diffluential field bubble, as long as we're talking about this? And if so, if we can just, for the perspective of the listeners, talk about the paranormal setting where there's some things that are non-local and local, kind of thing, all that in.
Because because we have certain elements here.
Yeah.
We have the concept, the principle of information.
That fits in too, so.
Yeah, Tim, sure. And then you and I've talked about this so many times you could probably recite it.
Yeah, I think you could.
But then again, at that point you wouldn't need a guest for the show.
Exactly.
Well, you light up the world, brother. So.
Well, that's it, man. I'm not one of these famous guys like these people. I don't know the story about how these guests tell you they're going to come on and then stiff you.
I don't know either.
I don't know what.
They don't even.
I don't know what's up with that either.
He must have been chasing demons last week or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, man. He got non-local on you.
Yeah, that spiritual warrior work must be
awful busy,
time consuming. Yep.
But he was a guest on the show Saturday, so whatever.
Let's put it this way. I don't like to talk too much about other people's work.
Right.
On a radio interview, I'll drift into it once in a while if asked. But let's say Bill very strongly promotes himself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes by any means necessary.
Right.
Because he's trying to achieve something professionally as a career.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you cross that line, it's like somebody who does have parapsychological abilities.
Right.
And when they get an impression, they get an impression.
Mm.
When they get information, they get information. But once they cross the line into doing it as a career, as a profession, they are required to be supernatural on demand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And stick to their message at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they resort to the parlor tricks.
Right.
Like Kreskin used to do. The mentalist tricks and all that kind of stuff.
He was amazing. I'll give him that.
Yeah, they have to resort to it, and so they compromise themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I can't have guests on radio shows if I was running them. Because
this is why that's all I do.
Yeah, after a couple months, nobody would want to come on. So anyway, what were we talking about? Oh yes, diffluential field bubbles.
Yes.
Okay.
We were getting there anyway.
Yes. I talked earlier about processes that are occurring above the physical. And that, increased densification creates the dimensions from which space-time emerges. So one of the things that we have to kind of perceive, and as you guys know, I have a lot of diagrams in my book that kind of visually show what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
This process, this pre-creational process, has a direction. It has a given polarity, if you want. And so there is something that's moving towards being physical and is pushing in that direction, the physical being the direction.
Right.
In the beginning of the universe, we had the emergence from the quantum singularity at the Big Bang of this huge ball of space-time that moved out in all directions. But it was a direction, and it was coming from something. So one of the things that is a characteristic of supergeometric theory is that the Big Bang is still occurring, that the universe is still unfolding from that pre-physical point, that pre-physical similarity, like a bicycle wheel, where the singularity is at the center, is at the hub, where if you're looking at it spinning from the side, it looks stationary. And then the pre-creational forces trickle down those spokes and materialize at the rim. People seem to like that model. They say, yeah, when I think about it that way, it makes sense. Well, that's because when I thought about it that way, it made sense to me, too.
That's why you read it.
I think it's like the slowest and fastest firecracker explosion ever.
There you go. Here comes the fetal position.
Yeah, I got my chair all ready, man.
Mommy. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be so comical about all this stuff, but I should probably be quite serious,
Well, you can do both, because information's information. You're just doing it in a very entertaining way.
Well, that's the thing, and I don't, I don't want people to diminish in their mind that because I'm using levity with my approach that these things aren't,
serious.
The earth-shattering concepts that they are. But anyway, so what's happening here? If we have a relatively calm surface of featureless space-time, where there's no material content, where there's that standoff, so to speak, that balance, what Einstein called, the fabric of space-time. And he said that there are places within space-time that have material.
Oh, I think we
lost
him.
Tom again.
Must be something in Florida going on.
Thomas.
That are hung on the space-time scaffolding, or I think more accurately to say they are embroidered within the fabric of space-time.
Thomas, can you repeat that again? We lost you after your first couple words.
Okay, all right. I think I'm paying the bill. I don't know. But what did we lose?
You were talking about imagining an even, motionless piece of space-time.
Yeah, like a flat fabric. Yeah, okay. And then Einstein said that in that fabric of space-time, in that in that continuous spatial field. You guys heard that before.
Mhm.
Yes.
Or in the space-time continuum. All right, these things have specific meanings that weren't expressed correctly on Star Trek. If you're,
Oh darn!
you
You just ruined my childhood, man.
yeah. No, I'm sorry. Worf did not express it correctly.
I got the fetal position chair. I'm fine.
Well, there you go. Okay. Yeah. Hope you brought the Depends.
Yeah, with my
Oh.
Red Bull both. So.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm covered. Don't worry about me.
Anyway, what Einstein said, and again, he was a materialist, so he's looking at it from the physical perspective,
Right.
is that we have material content, and around those material constructs, space bends. It's no longer a flat fabric. He likened it to stretching a rubber membrane across a mouth of a bowl, and then taking a ball bearing and placing it in the middle, and see how it sinks in and it forms this depression. So what my theory says is that these depressions are actually being pushed into space-time from above it by the processes that are going on out there. So it's almost like this cosmic finger reaches down and pushes into the fabric of space-time and forms a dimple in it. Now, from our side, we see a pimple or a bubble.
Mhm.
But from the other side, you would see a divot. And it's interesting that supergeometric theory, based on this, predicted, and it's a shame because the book was published many years after, one of its first predictions were that if we looked at a field of atoms, we would see a structure that looked like ping pong balls stacked one against the other. Just the tops of them.
Right.
Not the bottoms, but just the tops. Take ping pong balls, cut them all in half, and shove them together so the round parts are facing up.
Mhm.
It predicted that this is what a field of atoms would look like. From the supergeometric side, take all those ping pong balls, those half ping pong balls, and turn them upside down. That's what the field of atoms looks like from the other side, from above. And then some years later, after I made those predictions, I can actually show them to you in my notes, my handwritten notes. They finally got an electron microscope that was strong enough to take a photo of a field of atoms, and damn it, that's exactly what it looked like.
I know you could have gotten a Nobel Prize, man.
It looked like a box of ping pong balls.
I mean, we've read the book, so we can back you on that.
So, what we're looking at as a protrusion, well, from the other side, it's a depression. It's a dimple. It's a divot. Now, the first thing that we would expect to see if such a process was taking place in front of us on a small scale, the first thing that we would see is a merging bubble of space-time.
Mhm.
It would be this bubble that forms in the fabric of space-time. And one of the things that I relate to it is that it would look identical to what paranormal investigators call an orb.
Yeah.
And it would have several of the characteristics of orbs do. It would be wrapped by an electromagnetic field. It would give off a heat signature.
Mhm.
And in the middle of it, at least temporarily, until the laws of equilibrium took
break
place.
Right.
Yeah, if it expanded rapidly, you would have a cold spot in the middle.
Right.
This is prior. You would also have an independent gravitational field. Very tiny, but the larger the spatial expansion, the larger the gravitational field, which, according to my theory, creates what people call the feeling of heaviness prior to a paranormal event. This is the only theory, folks, that ties all this stuff together.
Yeah, it explains all the warm spots, the cold spots, the heaviness that we feel, all of it.
Yes, and also explains the spooky action of gravity. And the expanding universe.
You're right.
And dark matter and energy.
Yep, all of it. It really does. And science and religion.
And we hardly get to it on the radio because it's a little esoteric for, most listening audiences. But it also exposes what's behind the theory of supersymmetry.
Thomas.
Yes.
We have a question in chat.
Oh, I've been looking at the chat room, and it's been the same messages for the last hour.
Yeah, it says...
So I'm really off the map with this.
Resley asks, is the bubble of space-time our consciousness creating it so we can experience the bubble literally?
Read that again slower.
Is the bubble of space-time our consciousness creating it so we can experience the bubble?
Well, what is consciousness? I have yet to find anybody to give me a really good detailed explanation of that.
Okay.
So is a differential field bubble the same thing as consciousness?
Yeah,
I would say no.
Okay.
Can human intent...
Well, there's the,
Can human intent force a bubble into space-time?
No.
Yes. I believe it can.
Okay.
So I don't know whether that answers the question. I think someone's looking at it parapsychologically and philosophically.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is traditionally, guys, this is how, even in the alternative community, how the gurus teach the followers to think.
Yeah. But it's also, I mean, even in science, and I'm fetal position here. I'm just saying that out loud. But even in science, when we examine what atoms are doing, they've changed the way that we do the experiments because we're worried that the experimenter can have some sort of influence over the experiment.
Yes, we're talking about the observer observed.
Right.
Part of quantum field theory, quantum mechanics.
Yeah, but I think maybe part of that is consciousness influencing what we see, or our belief influencing what's going on with these atoms. You know
that what I mean? Is the normal metaphysical way that it has been looked at.
Yeah.
Supergeometry looks at it a little bit differently. That the observer and the observed are two parts of the same equation.
Right.
One of the evidences we have, and we talked about it before, and I say it comically, but when people stop and think about it, they say, oh, duh. What the hell was the universe doing for 14 billion years before we showed up? That it needs an observer to function?
That's a good point.
That's the evidence right there that there's something wrong. It's like Einstein said. He said, quantum physics is impressive, but I don't believe God rolls dice. He never fully bought it. He felt that there was some unanswered question about it. That if we understood what the answer to that was, we would see that the way that we measure and how we describe that uncertainty principle and the observer observed is just an illusion. We're looking at the surface of something that really has a deterministic underlying cause. And I'm a full supporter with Einstein on that. It's one of the things that caused me to look in certain directions. So to answer the chat room question, is consciousness the same as the differential field bubble, as the space-time bubble? No.
Okay.
No more than the observer and the observed are the exact same thing. Can one influence the other? Oh, absolutely. But one of the things that consciousness brings up that is part of this equation, and we alluded to it earlier, guys, was the concept of information. A diffluential field bubble remains an empty standing bubble unless information is fed into it. And that information can be called lots of different things. David Finkelstein, the physicist, very famous one, called it coherent superpositions. David Bohm, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, called it implicate order. Aristotle called it forms. Edgar Cayce called it the akasha. I call it supergeometry, because out of all those things, I think it's the most tangible and scientifically meaningful description of it.
Right.
Spiritually, you might call the soul. If you're a Christian and understand the underlying Greek in the first paragraph of the Gospel of John, you would understand it as the Logos. In the Old Testament, the Jewish tradition, you would call it the wisdom of God. God created the heavens and earth, and it was void and formless. And then he spoke the order. He spoke the information. He emitted light as the framework, the structure of it, and it made contact with that formless matter and shaped it into light. This is the mental picture.
Right.
So what we have at a paranormal event is the emergence of this three-dimensional bubble. And then information comes from that non-physical source, which is non-local.
Right.
That's that thing with locality, non-locality. We could talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
And as soon as it crests, as soon as it breaches the barrier of space-time, the light barrier, that information begins to materialize into its physical equivalent. So let's say we have a situation where we have a disembodied voice happening at a paranormally active site. There's no vocal cords there, guys.
Right.
And the plaster in the wall is not talking.
Yeah.
Right.
And the voice is not an underground river under the house or.
And it's not your dead Aunt Mary.
Yeah, it's these things are incapable of recording, storing, and playing back that type of complexity of information. It's coming from outside the physical.
Right.
Yeah, dead Aunt Mary. Like you said, Tim, where is dead Aunt Mary? Okay? She's like John Brown's Maudie. She's a moldering in the grave. So there is no physical source for dead Aunt Mary's voice, is there?
No.
Especially if it's an interactive thing where it's answering you and talking to you. That definitely isn't dead Aunt Mary.
No.
She's not physically in the universe anymore.
Nope.
So this information drops down into this bubble and begins to materialize and take form. Now, how does sound travel from it? In a normal way? Because understand, if we're hearing it, it is on an acoustical compression wave.
Right.
It's a propagating compression wave that's carrying the modulations that are the information that our ears can translate into a voice. That's normal sound. When you hear a disembodied voice, you're hearing a normal sound. The only thing that's paranormal is the source. There's no vocal cords.
It's non-local.
So how is it creating a normal sound? How's it creating an acoustical compression wave carrying modulations that contain the information that can be understood by a voice, by the human brain, which is the machine that translates it?
All right.
Well, and we know that it is acoustic because we've recorded those sounds at the same time that people have heard them with their ears. According to my theory, what's happening is the surface of the space-time bubble, the diffluential field bubble, begins to vibrate with the materializing information. And then that vibration off the surface of the bubble is conveyed through the air as an acoustical compression wave. So when you hear a disembodied voice, according to supergeometric theory, the actual fabric of space-time is acting as a speaker. That's frightening.
It
It
is.
is. Can I ask a fetal position question in regard to what you just said, Pete?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't mess yourself now.
No, I'm trying to paint the picture
Make sure
where
you get that depends on.
yeah the you don't see this and because we have a lot of paranormal and metaphysical people, you don't see this as like fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions. You see this as something extra dimensional outside of the four dimensions. That at the surface of this is basically the surface of conflict, the God and Satan that you pointed out.
Yes.
Which is the super geometric, and beneath that it creates things that manifest into light, which runs at the speed of light, and then matter, which runs slower than the speed of light. So the God and Satan here it's not a fifth or sixth dimension, it's super geometric.
Right.
And that's where the non-locality is. Plus, I guess my fetal position question is because of the sound that you get, would it have anything to do with bending of time? Could it be a sound that occurred in that location in 1820, and because it comes from this non-local place is recreating here?
Well, the singularity contains past, present, and future.
Right.
So the singularity from which from this voice emerges is timeless.
Okay.
It's not affected by the dimension of time. Therefore, it still contains the information of a voice that was uttered in 1820.
Okay.
This would be very similar to what Edgar Cayce had envisioned when he called it the Akashic Records.
Yeah.
The reason why they're called up in local time and space is because there is a connection with that local structure, that materialized structure in space-time. So that's why someone who lived in that house before could be seen or even heard.
So in a sense,
Yeah.
it is being recorded.
It's
Yes, in a sense, but not
re-
but not physically.
Right.
it's created from somewhere in the bending of space-time.
Right.
Or
Prior
because-
to it, yes.
Yeah, and because this God and Satan conflict that starts this whole thing runs faster than light, and light runs at the speed of light, and matter runs slower. So there's a lot of, in the bending of space-time, you got that, and then you have the non-locality, which is sometimes at time or I'm giving up. I'm going in my fetal position.
Mother.
I started off well.
You start off real well, yeah.
I just lost it.
Well, it's a big picture.
It is a big picture.
It's a big picture. It is a single picture. As you know, Chip, once you read the book enough times and think about it, if you hear any of my interviews and start putting it together, suddenly it clicks.
It does.
But there are so many aspects of it that are so outside of the things that we normally deal with and talk about.
Right, and it's very ahead of its time too. It
Yeah,
really
that
is very
you know
ahead of its time.
the wiring, that is embedded in our head, where we can look at that furry animal running across the lawn and say dog.
Mhm.
That wiring isn't fully established unless you're dealing with it over and over and over again,
Mhm.
like I have.
Right.
Then it becomes very established. I mean, I can go out in the front lawn and look at the tree that's growing in the yard and see something very different than most people who would look at it.
Right.
My head just got wired that way after time.
Mm.
So your eyes are trying to seek the source of it rather than the after effect of reality.
Right.
Which is what we see on the face of physical reality is the trail. It's like the exhaust stream that comes out of your tailpipe on your car.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the car is hidden. It's behind the cosmic veil.
Right.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what it is. So, I mean, if anybody, with this disembodied voices, if anybody's ever made a comb kazoo, where they took the comb and they stretched a piece of paper across its teeth and then started humming through it.
Oh, yeah,
Making
back
a
in the
vibe-
day.
Yeah, back in the day, yes.
Those are going back to our childhood now.
That's right. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm regressing, and there's no hypnotist.
Yeah. Right.
I'm sorry, I'm back.
That's okay.
But
That's
yeah.
okay, says the hypnotist.
Yeah.
most people would know what that is. If you picture the piece of paper stretched across the comb as the fabric of space-time, and everything behind a piece of paper are structures and processes occurring above space-time in the pre-physical or the supergeometric. That fabric, that piece of paper is vibrating and putting out an acoustic compression wave that you could hear. And in this case, in the supergeometric model, that sheet of paper is actually the fabric of space-time itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that sounds crazy.
No, because it paints a visual picture where everything is connected.
Yeah. And in paranormal phenomena, that model answers,
All
it
the
describes all the things that occur in a paranormal active site.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
It
I just
connects
came
them
out of my
together.
I just came out of my fetal position now.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I feel so much better.
Now, here you go, guys. We didn't get to this when we were talking, Chip.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, here you go. Remember, I said the bubble is jacketed in an electromagnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's caused by the compression of the air in the folded space-time around the bubble. The air contains molecules. The molecules have atoms. The atoms have electrons and protons and all those particles.
Mhm.
So when they get compressed, they start getting twisted by the warping of that space-time. Those electrons get excited. They jump up into their orbits, into the next valences. You can look up valence online.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates an electromagnetic field.
Right.
Now, what happens if the fabric of space-time begins to vibrate according to the materializing information of a voice? One of the things it can do is to put out an electromagnetic compression wave. And the electromagnetic compression wave is carrying the frequency and the amplitudes of the information that's materializing inside the space-time bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the electromagnetic compression wave, we can't see that. We can't hear that with our ears.
Yeah, it's beyond our frequencies to receive.
It reaches a microphone. It bypasses the dynamic diaphragm altogether because it's not acoustic. It can't agitate the diaphragm. But it induces itself on the magnetic coils that the diaphragm plunger, whatever it is connected to, that passes in and out it passes through the magnetic coils according to the vibration of the diaphragm it's connected to, and that electromagnetic signal that is the result of that passing through those coils is translated by the machine into sound. In this case, the information being conveyed by an electromagnetic propagating wave induces itself directly on the coils. And then the recording device translates it like normal sound, and we play it back and we hear an EVP where nobody heard a sound when it was being recorded because it was electromagnetic. Yes.
That
Now
explains
comes the time for all the paranormal investigators to get their box of Depends.
Yeah, I got mine. Can I ask a fetal position question quickly based on what you just said?
Certainly.
Because the electrons are getting excited and creating this new wave. I will just put it that way.
Yeah.
Is that where the gamma frequencies would come from?
Actually, based on David's experiments and my theory, these openings of these diffluential field bubbles are actually the same structure that would be seen or measured in an emerging wormhole.
Wow.
An emergent Einstein-Rosen bridge would also be the same opening that occurred in the beginning of the universe.
Wow.
This is where supergeometric theory gets really crazy, where it ties everything together and it says paranormal phenomena is essentially a miniaturized, localized version of the same process that brought the universe into existence.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Talk about tying everything together.
That does it for sure.
At one of the symposiums, I sat down with a woman from Alaska who had a degree in cosmology. Okay. She
I hope
told
she
me
brought her Depends.
well, yeah. After 20 minutes of listening to me talking to her, she said, "You have just configured my entire education."
Right?
Reconfigured it. She said, "Because you've never taken those courses, you have no idea of the mysteries that still exist in that field that what you told me solves."
Right, yeah. It really does. I mean, it brings everything together.
Yeah.
And it also credits everything. It credits science. It credits religion. It credits the paranormal and supernormal.
So, where could we get luminous phenomena?
Oh.
Well, these electrons that are in these atoms that are in the molecules that are being excited and pressed and twisted by that surface of the bubble of space-time, that diffluential field bubble, those electrons are jumping in energy level to their higher valences. We find an interesting phenomena that's known in physics. It's another anomaly, but we handle it and use it all the time. When electrons lose their energy, their excited state, and drop back down to the lower orbits, they emit photons.
Right.
Okay? So that's how an LED works. So you can get a luminous phenomena on the outside of that ball.
Right.
Coming literally out of thin air.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, so it goes on and on. You guys know, it goes on and on and on.
Right.
You know, pump the information of dead Aunt Mary in it, and you're going to see an apparition.
Right.
And the surface it presents is going to reflect or emit or absorb light just like a normal object would.
Right.
There's nothing in the paranormal field that has ever even approached something close to this.
Yeah. Well, I'm still wondering what kind of devices we would make in order to find these diffluential field bubbles, or even or anything like that. What did Graham do? Do you know?
Well, Graham hasn't gotten that far.
Okay.
But David Roundtree did.
All right.
David Roundtree is so awesome. I miss him.
Yeah, I miss him too. He got, we talked about this before.
We did.
Yeah, he got messed up. Everybody can talk about how he got messed up, and they could take a side, pro or con. David's a victim. David's the villain. You can look at it any way you want.
I love him. That's all I think when I think of him. He was brilliant.
Yeah, but regardless of what you thought of him personally,
Brilliant.
the field lost
Yeah.
one of its greatest proponents when he
did.
dropped out of it.
It did. Yeah.
So one of the things that David did is he created the greatest piece of paranormal test equipment that was ever devised, was the EMF quadrilator.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did was set off a grid. He set up a grid with 4 sensors
Mm-hmm.
and cordoned off a space, a rectangular or a square space. This is why Graham Smith needs to find a stable paranormally active site.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have some sort of idea in what area an event is likely to emerge.
Right.
You can't carry this stuff around a freaking haunted house. You can't do that.
Thomas, David did that on Ghost Stalkers on the show.
Yes,
He tested that.
yes. But they didn't let him on that show. They didn't let him get into it.
I know. They let him on it
Because
enough.
they were, too busy doing the sensational stuff.
Right.
They were too busy, catering to the whims of the ego John Tenney,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all that stuff.
He won't come on this show either. I have asked him. He won't do it for whatever
Oh
reason.
yeah, he's been trying to
He cancels out.
scratch his way back to something ever since they took out Paranormal State to next class or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was basically his highlight.
Yep.
And again, I don't like to talk about these guys, but when you do, you get to understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
That it's like behind the cosmic veil too. Well, this is behind the celebrity veil.
Yeah.
And when you understand what's going on, then you can see why things are manifesting in the physical world the way they are.
Yeah. These are the type of guys that bail on my show that don't cancel or nothing. They just bail. So.
Yeah, man.
Because everybody knows they're full of crap.
Wow.
Oh boy.
Hey, I
So-
just wanted to interject, and I don't mean to step on you. For those of you just joining us, and we've only got a few minutes left, but we're with Thomas Fusco, author of the most fascinating book that we've ever read, that really lumps science and religion and physics and paranormal and psychic and supernormal all together in a way that explains everything, and it's simple. But you can find the book at cosmicveil.com. Veil is VEIL. And you can get a good deal on that site. That's why we wanted to take you to that site, Cosmic Veil. Thomas P. Fusco, the author of the amazing book Behind the Cosmic Veil. Just
And
wanted to get that in.
And they
I'll
could
shut
send the hate mail too.
The hate mail, that's your guys, man.
Yeah.
I only get weird mail on my website. No, some people do write, and they write some pretty nice stuff. In the past, I've usually gotten people that had their own theories
Right.
and would be writing to me about them. For some reason, what I talk about rings a bell with so many people that these people that have their own theories somehow believe, because I rang a certain bell,
Mm-hmm.
that somehow I'm confirming their theory.
Right.
And then they tell me about it, and I say, well, it can't be this, and that. And then I get the hate mail.
Thomas, we're about out of time, but are you available the 17th? Would you be available?
Let me look at my calendar.
That's what, 2 Tuesdays from now, right?
Yeah.
2 Tuesdays from now.
I have an opening.
Well, yeah, I could do that.
Okay.
I
Awesome.
think I could do that. Yeah, I don't see any reason why not.
Okay.
Just shoot me a like a Facebook message a day or two before to remind me, hey, your butt needs to be here,
Okay.
and we'll do it. But I did want to add one thing real quick,
Okay.
because I want to get back into that religious thing again. What I'm talking about is how Jesus fed thousands of people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember what it says is it didn't say that Jesus made thousands of fishes and thousands of loaves.
No, it
It
didn't.
says that he fed thousands of people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So everybody was eating the same 5 loaves and the same 2 fishes. Okay, now that's the thing that put my wife in a fetal position. When she got that was like, oh, let me pull over. Because it was in a car conversation. So what that was 5 loaves and 2 fishes materialized in thousands of different places in the same coordinate of time at the same moment. And so this ties all that together too.
It does. It really applies to everything. It's like, I can't look at the world or the universe or beyond the universe the same way anymore. I can't look at dimensions the same way anymore. All these extra dimensions that we talk about here. It changes everything, but it's so simple. I mean, every single thing applies to it.
Yep.
In science, in religion, in the paranormal and parapsychological, in the psychic world, the quantum physics world, everything.
Yep.
Yeah, and the only people that really wig out and start bouncing off the walls on this stuff, really, are the people involved in the paranormal field who look at what they do and the way that they understand it as their religion.
Yeah.
And we know there's people in the paranormal field that look at the paranormal as a religion.
Mm.
And unfortunately, if you read this book, you may have to change denominations.
Well, it kind of enhances the denomination. They may have to change their ego a bit.
Well, yeah, it's
Because it's
like
all
that
about,
one
this was my theory and I created it, and then this guy comes up with this thing that interferes with my theory, so I'm going to fight harder for my theory.
Yeah, there was this one host, and I mentioned him to you. I might have mentioned him to you too, Tim, off air.
Uh-huh.
I won't mention him on the air.
Yeah,
But
we know who you're talking about.
Yeah, unfortunately, he had a tragedy in his life that he had lost a child
Mm-hmm.
at a young age.
Right.
And what he was hanging his hat on was the multiverse.
Right.
That
Yeah, I know
his
you're
child
talking
was still alive in other universes.
Yeah.
And so when he came upon my theory, he invited me on for the express purpose of assassinating me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my goodness.
Intellectually, of cutting me up,
Yeah,
of
I remember that.
discrediting me, because it discredited his religious belief.
Yeah, he was the one who created the millimeter.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Mr. Kindness here is going to have to cut you up because I think we're out of time.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get out of here and end the show, Thomas.
All right, guys.
We'll see you in
Thanks for having me on, man.
You're welcome.
Hey, we
Thank
love you, man.
Yeah, we
God bless you. I mean, this book is the best book that it's all encompassing. Behind the Cosmic Veil, on cosmicveil.com.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Fusco.
Yep, by Thomas Fusco. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Thomas, for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Excellent.
All right. Good night, everybody. Have a great week, and enjoy the 4th. It's going to be a hot one, I believe. So.
Yeah. Woo.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Oh.